The heat on Glenelg Beach was suffocating on January 26, 1966. Thousands of families crowded the sand, seeking refuge from the blistering Australian summer, their voices blending into a wall of white noise. Somewhere in that dense, sun-baked mass of humanity, 9-year-old Jane, 7-year-old Arnna, and 4-year-old Grant Beaumont were playing in the shallows. They were three ordinary siblings enjoying a national holiday, surrounded by countless witnesses. Yet in the span of a few hours, they evaporated. No screams, no struggle, no trace left behind in the sand. The initial timeline seemed straightforward, anchored by a handful of credible sightings. A postman remembered seeing the Beaumont children walking alone, laughing as they moved away from the water. A local shopkeeper recalled selling them pastries, noting they paid with a £1 note their mother had never given them. But the most chilling detail came from a cluster of beachgoers who noticed a tall, blond man in his mid-30s interacting with the siblings. He was relaxed, confident, even helping them dress after their swim. Investigators immediately latched onto this phantom figure, pouring all their resources into identifying the tall, blond stranger. Sketches were distributed, and Adelaide police mobilized the largest manhunt in the nation's history, chasing down every rumor of a man matching that vague description. But this aggressive, singular focus created a dangerous tunnel vision. The official narrative calcified around the beach and the stranger, causing law enforcement to disregard the geographical constraints of the children's actual walking path homeward. When a high-profile abduction occurs, the first 48 hours dictate the trajectory of the entire case. A systemic failure during this critical window does not just delay justice, it actively buries it under layers of misdirected momentum. The authorities assumed the predator had a vehicle parked near the esplanade, spiriting the victims far beyond the city limits before the alarm was even raised. This assumption blinded them to the immediate industrialized perimeter bordering the children's route. Less than a mile from the shoreline stood the Castalloy factory, a sprawling manufacturing plant that cast a long shadow over the surrounding residential streets. The facility was an active industrial zone, a labyrinth of concrete, machinery, and freshly dug trenches for new plumbing installations. On the day the siblings vanished, the site was largely deserted due to the public holiday, making it a perfect, undisturbed environment for someone needing to hide something quickly. A local resident reported a strange anomaly near the factory boundaries on the very weekend the search began. They noticed a man digging a large hole in a restricted area of the Castalloy property, a detail that should have triggered an immediate, full-scale excavation. The earth had been disturbed, the soil freshly turned, presenting a glaring physical irregularity right on the edge of the police dragnet. It was the red thread, dangling in plain sight, waiting to be pulled. Inexplicably, the initial search teams barely glanced at the factory grounds. The command center was too consumed by the eyewitness reports of the blond man at the beach, convinced the answer lay in transient predators rather than local geography. A cursory check of the Castalloy perimeter was conducted, but it lacked the rigor required of a homicide investigation. No shovels broke the ground, no forensic teams analyzed the disturbed soil, and no dogs were brought in to trace the scent. To understand this oversight is to understand the psychology of the opportunistic predator. A killer operating in a densely populated area rarely relies on complex, long-distance transportation if a secure, immediate disposal site is available. The factory offered an impenetrable fortress of industrial noise and restricted access. By utilizing a pre-existing construction trench, the perpetrator could seamlessly blend their crime into the legitimate industrial activity of the following work week. As days bled into weeks, the temperature in Adelaide shifted from sweltering heat to a chilling paranoia. The disappearance fractured the illusion of safety that defined mid-century Australian life. Parents stopped letting their kids walk to school. Locks were installed on doors that had previously remained open, and the city held its collective breath. The phantom blonde man became a boogeyman, while the true path the children took faded from the collective memory. The tragedy of the Beaumont children is not just a story of a horrific crime. It is a clinical study in how investigative bias shapes reality. When law enforcement commits to a specific theory, contrary evidence is often subconsciously filtered out. The witness accounts of the beach interaction were compelling, but they were also unverified fragments of a chaotic afternoon. By prioritizing these fragments over the hard physical reality of the factory's geography, the investigation doomed itself. Decades later, new eyes began to review the crumbling, yellowed files of the original investigation. Cold case detectives stripped away the mythos of the beach sightings and mapped the hard data of the children's movements. When they overlaid the timeline with the geographical layout of the neighborhood, the Castalloy factory suddenly glowed like a beacon. The logistics of moving 3 children on foot pointed directly toward that industrial sector. Armed with ground-penetrating radar and modern forensic technology, search teams finally returned to the factory site more than half a century too late. The radar detected anomalies beneath the concrete floor, distinct variations in the soil density that strongly suggested a trench had been dug and quickly refilled. For a brief, agonizing moment, it seemed the red thread had finally led to the center of the maze. Heavy machinery cracked through the decades-old concrete, the deafening roar of the drills echoing the delayed urgency of the search. Investigators sifted through the dirt by hand, searching for bone, fabric, or any microscopic trace of Jane, Arnna, and Grant. The atmosphere was thick with the weight of 50 years of grief, every scoop of earth carrying the desperate hope of a definitive answer. But the earth yielded nothing but animal bones and industrial debris. The anomalies detected by the radar were real, confirming the soil had indeed been disturbed exactly when the witness claimed, but the trench was empty. The devastating reality set in. The site may have been a temporary holding location, or the killer may have returned to move the evidence. Once the initial heat died down, the delay had cost them everything. The psychological toll on the original detectives was immense, a heavy burden carried to their graves. They had operated in an era before digital surveillance, relying on human memory, which is notoriously fragile and easily corrupted by suggestion. The intense public pressure to find the blonde man had forced them into a corner, making it impossible to step back and evaluate the primary path objectively.
They were hunting a ghost while ignoring the graveyard. This catastrophic oversight forever altered how missing persons cases are handled. Modern protocols demand a concentric, grid-based search outward from the point of disappearance, regardless of witness testimony. If someone vanishes, every structure, every trench, and every abandoned building within a 1-mile radius is locked down and forensically swept. The protocols we rely on today were written in the blood and absence of those who slipped through the cracks. Looking back at the archival records, the timeline discrepancy remains the most haunting element. The children were expected home by noon, yet sightings placed them near the beach hours later. If those later sightings were mistaken identities, a common occurrence in highly publicized cases, then the children never made it far from their initial route. The factory was directly in their path, a massive blind spot that swallowed the investigation whole. Today, Glenelg Beach looks much as it did in the mid-20th century. The waves still crash against the shore, and families still crowd the sand on summer afternoons. But beneath the idyllic surface lies a permanent scar. The space where three siblings once played is now a monument to the fragility of life and the terrifying reality that someone can simply vanish into the ether, aided by the very people trying to find them. The red thread of the Castalloy factory remains the most agonizing, unpulled thread in Australian criminal history. Had the initial search teams locked down that perimeter on day one, had they trusted the geographical logic over the chaotic noise of eyewitness accounts, the outcome might have been entirely different. Instead, the evidence was buried under fresh concrete, sealing away the truth and leaving behind a mystery that continues to unravel the minds of those who study it. The Beaumont children case stands as a grim reminder that the most crucial piece of evidence is often the one we choose to walk past. In the relentless pursuit of a suspect, the primary path was ignored, proving that sometimes the greatest obstacle to justice is not the cunning of the killer, but the blind spots of the investigation. The truth was always there, waiting in the disturbed earth until time and concrete made it untouchable.